The majority of the work I've done has been on cars and bikes, but I enjoy a change of pace. I was recently contacted by Steve Rice from Kentucky, a retired engineer who builds fine quality banjos. He wanted some instruction on making rims for banjos from copper sheet. We quickly developed a plan for him to come to California for a private workshop so I could show him how to make these parts. The rim is fairly straightforward. It's a ring of copper sheet, 11 inches in diameter, and 3 inches tall, and both edges are wired. I decided it would be good to make fixtures so the parts would be accurately sized, and Steve has a CNC router which is ideal for this. I sent drawings to Steve, and he cut the parts and shipped them to me. I'm going through the process before he gets here, so I'll be up to speed when we start the workshop. The material I'm using is 32-ounce 110 alloy copper, which measures 43 thousandths in thickness. While copper is quite expensive these days, this material is used a lot in the roofing industry, so it's widely available. The first step is learning how much this material springs back, so we'll know what size to make the bending fixtures. I've cut a strip of this material. I'm going to bend it over a form of a known diameter. I'm using a paint can here, which is 7 inches in diameter. So I have a stop put on my table. I'll put the end of the metal against the stop and then bend this as far as I can. Then we'll measure the bend. So the diameter measures 10.5 inches. If my goal is to make a disc 11 inches in diameter, that tells me the form I bend over needs to be 7.33 inches. So here's the form that Steve made for me. It's made of 5 layers of MDF. I put a little clamping block on one side. So the way the clamping block works is I slide the material underneath it and then tighten it down. And that holds the edge quite securely. And that gets the bend to start right at the edge of the material. So we'll bend this around as far as we can in one direction. I'll release it and put the material in the other way, reclamp it, and we'll finish the bend from the other side. So when I bring the ends together, that gives us a ring that is exactly 11 inches in diameter. It's time to weld these ends together now, and I'm working over an aluminum bar with a slightly rounded top surface. I'll use that to align the edges as I do the welding. So I'll hold this temporarily with a spring clamp, get the best alignment I can. Then I'll use C-clamps to hold the ends securely. I want to have a nice tight fit up with no gap. And now I can put the tack welds on this. I'm using a special deoxidized copper welding rod that's designed for this application. If you try using copper wire, you will get porosity in your weld, so the deoxidized rod is a must. And I'll just put a few tacks on this joint. Okay, the alignment looks excellent, so I'll get one clamp out of the way and finish the joint from this side toward the center. And I'll move the clamp and weld to the other end. So there's our weld. I'll flip this over so we can look at the penetration. And the penetration looks excellent. So the weld is complete. When it cools down, I'll sand it flat. I can see there's a couple of small low spots here, so I'll tap those down from the inside. And I'll sand it again. Okay, the outside is cleaned up beautifully. I'm going to clean up the inside by sanding as well. So that has cleaned up very nicely. I'm going to use a beading machine to start tipping the flange on this in preparation for making a wired edge. This is a power beading machine, but a manual machine would work just as well. I have a couple of different dies put together on the bottom of this so that there's a shoulder here that I can ride the edge of the metal against as I'm tipping the flange. That will ensure that the width of the flange is very accurate. And there's a formula for how wide a flange you need to make a wired edge. The formula is 2.5 times the diameter of the wire plus 1 material thickness. I'm using 1/8 inch wire, so 2.5 times 1/8 inch is 5/16, and adding 1 material thickness gets us pretty close to 3/8 of an inch. So I've adjusted the position of this top die so it's 3/8 of an inch away from the flange on the bottom die. So we're all set to go here to make a 3/8 flange. So I'll start by putting the copper piece in the dies, touching the stop on the lower die. And I'll put just a little pressure on this, and I'm going to start rolling this through fairly slowly. I'm not really putting any pressure on this, I'm just getting the feel for it, making sure it runs pretty smoothly without snagging on anything. You need to have your edges deburred to make this work properly. And everything seems to be working fine. I'm just about halfway around now. No problem at all so far. Just about at the end. So I finished one lap on this and everything's working smoothly. Now I'm going to put a little pressure on this, so I'm starting to form a flange at about a 10-degree angle. And I will go all the way around the part, forming a 10-degree flange. So I finished the first lap. Now I'm going to increase the angle a little bit. We're going to about 20 degrees on the second lap. Okay, ready for lap number 3. We're going to go for about 30 degrees now. And now we'll shoot for about 45 degrees. So I've gone around the whole part and gotten that flange up to 45 degrees, and everything's looking very nice so far. And to get this to 90, I'm going to put it on another fixture that Steve made for me. So here's the fixture that Steve made for me. The top portion is made in segments and they're keyed together in such a way that the parts can be removed. We'll need to do that when we form the second flange on this. So for now, I'll just slip this into place, over the fixture, push it down until it's snug, and then I'll tap the metal down until it flattens out against the top surface of this form. So that's worked beautifully. I'll pull this off so you can take a close look. So we have a perfect 90-degree angle all the way around this edge now. And the next thing we'll do is to roll up the 2 wire rings. So here's another very simple bending fixture made the same way as we made the fixture for the copper ring. And I have a 6-foot length of stainless wire here, 1/8-inch wire, and this should be enough to make 2 rings. So I'll slip the bar behind this stop and then start rolling it around the ring. And like I say, I'm hopeful I can get 2 rings with this same setup. Okay, that's all nice and tight against the fixture. I'll carefully unwind this, get the tension out of it. So here's another fixture Steve made for me. This is made out of 1/8-inch thick aluminum plate, and it has an accurately sized hole in the center, so it will hold the ends in just the right location. So now I know where this has to be trimmed, and I can actually hold the parts in the proper alignment as I tack weld the edges together. So I've cut the bulk of the waste off this, and now I'm going to fine-tune the fit. So I'll get this slipped into place. I have a little overlap on this end, so I'll mark it for the trimming. And I'm going to trim it just slightly oversized. Actually, I have a perfect fit. My intention was to cut it oversized and sand it to fit, but I guess I cut it just right. So this is ready to tack weld together now. There's the first tack. And that should be sufficient. I really should not have to add any rod to this joint. It's time to start working this flange over the wire now. I'm going to try doing this in a way I've never tried before. Since I have this wonderful fixture, my plan is to put 3 of these wire rings inside it. And they're a nice snug fit. And then with the wire rings in place, I'll put this assembly on the top of the fixture, press this down, and this spaces this up off the top surface of the fixture, well, 3/8 of an inch, because there's 3 thicknesses there. And I'm going to use a bolt to hold this down so it can't move around as I'm tapping on it. I'll tighten this up a bit. And I'm going to use a hammer and a caulking tool to start working the metal down, rolling it over the wire. That's working great. So I'll start working this part down against the form. Now I'll rotate this clamping block so I can do the parts I couldn't reach previously. So this is working great so far. I'll pull it off the form so you can take a closer look. So we're up to a great start in curling the copper around the wire. The next step is to trap the wire inside the copper, and I've modified a set of vice grip pliers to make that easier. So I welded a little extension on the bottom jaw, and the reason for that is so the pliers can push tightly against the wire to hold it down in the base of the groove. And then I'll use a hammer with a rounded face to tap the metal down, capturing the wire. I want to do that in a number of places. So the wire is trapped now and is held tightly in the bottom corner of that flange. So I put a set of flat dies in the beating machine, and I'm going to start pulling that inner flange down until it's parallel with the outer part of the rim. So we'll bring it down a little bit at a time. So that's working great so far, and I'll put a different die on the top of the beating machine to wrap the copper the rest of the way around the wire. I put an 8mm beating die on the top shaft of the machine, and that'll put the pressure right on the edge of this flange. And again, we'll bring it down just a little bit at a time. So there is our finished wired edge, and I'd say it came out great. So with the first edge wired, I'll start the process for the second edge. Okay, so I'll put this back on the fixture and we'll get on to the next step. It's time to put the rim back on the form now. And you can see why this form was made in segments. Otherwise, I couldn't get it back on the form at this time. So I'm going to line up the holes in this. I'll get the smaller pieces put into place. And tighten these all down. And now I can hammer this edge flat. So I will place the 3 wires under this at a later stage to get that edge angle more extreme. But right now I want to work all these wrinkles out. And that's best done by hammering against the flat surface of the form. Alright, that's flattened out very nicely. So I'll disassemble this one more time and put the wires into place. So I'll slip the wires in now and put it back on the form. And I'll tap this edge down. Okay, let's pull this apart. And from this point on, the finishing will be exactly like I did on the first side, so I won't bother to show that. So the first banjo ring is finished, and I think it came out great. The surface finish is superb, both inside and out. I was able to hold the tolerances very closely, and there's not a lot of tooling marks on this that I had to clean up. So obviously these fixtures helped a lot with making this part. Of course, if you're only making 1 or 2 parts, you wouldn't make fixtures like this. But when you're making multiples, it really does make sense. So I hope you've learned some things in this video that you can apply to your own personal projects. I'll see you next time. I love making these videos, and I'm honored that you're watching. Please like, subscribe, and click the bell to be notified about new videos. I read every comment, and I do my best to answer all questions. If you like what I'm doing, please click the Patreon link and become one of the great people who help me create new videos.